Real estate development investment is not for the faint of heart. I always get people that approach me and think my job's so sexy and the buildings that I do are so pretty, but there is so much that nobody knows that goes into all of that. You really have to get your head around if you're willing to start on this journey into real estate investing. So if you're not willing to invest your own capital, have it be patient, persevere through a million different variables that can go along in real estate, you will lose. I'm Megan Epstein. I'm a real estate developer, and I've made it through several market cycles, a pandemic, inflation, rising interest rates, full circled 12 projects now after knowing nothing and starting with no capital. I can tell you it takes an awesome amount of perseverance. One of my first projects, I literally called a for sale by owner sign. And the guy was a real estate developer, or so I was told. He took $1 million that I had raised and basically wasted it. And that was one of my very first forays into like thinking, oh, it's so idealistic. I'm just going to give this guy money and he's going to build a building on the water. What ended up happening after that literally set me up for my career, but was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through in my life, to the point where, I ended up like just praying in the middle of a park that I was going to not go bankrupt. So after I gave him this money, time went by, he was not breaking ground on the project. As I dove in, I talked to the banker we were supposed to be using that was going to give us a loan to build it. And they essentially just didn't believe that we could sell it for how much he thought we could sell it for. Now, today, I think that it's selling for $900 a foot. At the time, it was 2016, they didn't believe that we could sell it for $600 a foot. So I had my back against the wall. I had told the developer partner that I wanted to take over the project. He was amenable to it, but he was only giving me 6 months to pull it off. And I had no idea how he was going to do it. And I think I got to month 5 after trying to raise capital, trying to get people to invest, and coming up short with my back completely against the wall. Long story short, I think he even tried to like subpoena my house. I had never been in any sort of legal trouble. I've gotten like a speeding ticket once when I was 16. I was terrified when someone came to try to serve me at my house. And that was like the scariest moment when I thought, shit, I really got to figure this out. Well, I had talked to a really brilliant architect builder at the time, and they figured out that I had to wipe the plans, which to me was like unheard of, because we had spent over $500,000 on these plans and they just did not work at all. Like basically what was designed was going to cost too much to where investors in the bank couldn't get comfortable with what we would have to sell the units for. And so that took really stepping out of the box and thinking, fresh about it in a moment of complete desperation, where I basically just had to go, okay, we just burned $500,000 on these plans. That's all up in smoke. I only had invested $1 million. So basically half my investment's gone, and I had to start over. So we started over with a different type of construction, basically a wood frame versus concrete. And got the same amount of square footage, but was able to build it for much less. And I worked with a GC and architect on that. And then after that, I was able to get the right investment in, and we were getting ready to break ground. Then I get a call from the Army Corps that I can't actually build on the river. And that was just a false alarm, but it was the scariest false alarm. And we had to work with them. We had to work with the city to really understand the floodplain. We had to position our garage in such a way that if the flood came in from the river over, they call it a 100-year floodplain, like if in the next 100 years, if this actually flooded, what would happen to your building? We had to design it basically so the garage was on the ground floor and lift the units up enough. So, okay, good. We made that change. We got there. Then we went to go close our construction loan to build it, and there was an error in the title, meaning that when they did the title work, I guess not all of the original owners had signed off properly. So I ended up chasing down 4 heirs that were basically wealthy people that had sold this land 6 years ago, I believe, before we bought it. And, one was in North Carolina Highlands. I had to send someone to go find them because they would never pick up their phone. One of the brothers was an attorney in Nashville. He helped me. The other brother was on safari in Africa. I had to track all these people down and get their signature on this document saying that they had meant to sell this because the title was messed up. And you would think like title insurance would have handled it. And I know the title company was helping me, but I wasn't the purchaser of the property. The developer that initially started was. So right when I think we're getting started, I had to go like on this wild goose chase, chasing around these people to clean up the title. Okay, great. We're ready to start. And we're 3 months behind schedule at this point, or we're far behind the original schedule. We're ready to start. The original investors that I had brought in all wanted to be out because they didn't believe in the plan by then. Okay. So I had to go find new investors, and I agreed to let them go out. I gave them like a decent return. Had they stayed in the deal, they would have made 3-4 times as much, but they didn't have any faith in what I was doing. Okay. Get ready to break ground. Nashville has a tornado that hits and takes out everything, like the building, completely damages the building next door. There was a jail across the street at the time that ended up getting damaged, and then they demoed it, which ended up being a good thing for my projects. No one wants to be across from the jail. The tornado hit, and I just thought, well, this is actually good because if I was on schedule, I would have been decimated. That was a whole thing. Then I think we actually finally broke ground. The market happened to be riding up with us. The area continued to develop. And the ironic thing is if I had done the original project on time and budget, it would not have been as successful, because by the time we actually finished, the sound stadium, like the baseball stadium, had gone in. The jail across the street had been demolished. The area continued to develop, and prices had increased. I developed my short-term rental business model that we implemented. And so there was a lot that happened as I learned, and just really was lucky. I think you make your own luck, but it was lucky. And then I had to actually build it, design it, sell it, make all the investors happy. But that was just getting to ground zero on my very first deal. And if I wasn't probably on the verge of bankruptcy the whole time, like I don't know if I would have had the strength to push through. But I was 1 year married. My husband probably thought, what did I sign up for? This crazy girl is like going to bankrupt me. And anyways, it ended up being a massive success. I think we sold for, much higher than we thought, and sold out in a couple weeks or something crazy. But it took so much perseverance that I could have never possibly estimated at the time. I would say the number one trait you need as a real estate investor or developer is persistence, because to do or develop or build anything from the ground up, which is much, much different than working in software or, buying something for $1 and selling it for $2. There are 5,000 things that you have to do from the first time that you see something that you want to build until you sell that last unit or lease up the last unit or sell it to an investor, and at least a span of 3 to 4 years. So there's a million things that can go wrong that you have to be willing to, lean into your intelligence, lean into your partners, like find the right people, and be willing to persevere. Another thing that's really important is that you have patient capital, or you're investing your own capital, and you have to be willing to be conservative in your underwriting and keep your money in as long as you can, or be willing to ride your capital through market cycles, because if the market changes or you run into something, inevitably a project is not going to go exactly as you thought. You have to be willing to have your capital be in longer than you anticipate, so you don't have to pull out and take a loss out of desperation, so you can ride through a market cycle. One thing that being a developer the last decade has taught me is to be very, very conservative in your underwriting and projections, because things always change. Nobody could have ever predicted that interest rates were going to go up as high as they did, or that complete cities demographics would completely shift with the pandemic, or that inflation would cause tourism to go down as much as it is. There are always a bunch of outside factors, or that we, bombed Iran in the last month. Like, crazy factors can happen, and you have to be ultra conservative in your underwriting. So in my experience, we've ended up, sometimes beating our projections by 20, 30%. And I think that's a much better place to be in, as opposed to being so, tight in your underwriting that you don't have a lot of wiggle room for all of the things that can go wrong. So that means thinking that if you can sell something for $100, then you should say you're going to sell it for $80 and see if it still works. If you can finance it for what current rates are today, you should trend, rate changing into the future. If you think you can build it for X amount, you need to add at least a 5 to 10% contingency. If the deal still works after that, then, it's probably worth taking that risk on. You cannot get emotional about your real estate investments. A lot of times I've, loved the design of something, or I get really excited about what I'm going to make this look and feel like, or, I think it's a super awesome location, but I've had to divorce myself from projects because they just are not good enough deals. And it doesn't matter how much time I've spent on it or how excited I am. You're much better off, not doing a project if it doesn't have enough of the underwriting metrics, or that it's not conservative enough to work. And so you cannot get emotional about either the person you're investing with and just basing it on their personality. You have to base your investments on data and be willing to walk away, even if it's a cool project, if you want to preserve your capital. I'm Megan Bell Epstein, and if you want to find out more about what I invest in, check out my next video.